Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and I want to thank upfront our sponsors, Mallinckrodt Pharmaceutical, Gemini Beauty, and next podcast you're going to hear about our very special new sponsor, still under wraps, but we're very excited to add a third sponsor to the podcast and appreciate all of the support you've shown to us over the last 2 seasons. Today, my guest, here's the first thing I'll say about my guest, other than her name, Krissy Stephenson, is how she came to us. And I love that story. I think Dr. Bly was our second or third podcast guest. She's a medical advisory board member for Lupus LA. And she referred you to us. She said, I have a patient that would be great for your podcast. And so I love that that's how you came to us because, well, first, we love Dr. Blyde, but also I think it's really important for people who have been involved with the podcast or our audience to really come out and tell their stories and encourage other people to tell their stories. So Krissy is here to tell her story. She's a mom of 2 kids, a small business owner, and has had a lot of lupus struggles over the last, particularly in the recent time. And so she's here to tell us all about it. So welcome to the show, Krissy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So first, everybody's going to notice your accent. So tell us your story. Where are you from? Where'd you start? How'd you get here?
Complicated, but yes, my accent is like a jumbled mix of lots of things. I was born in Toronto, Canada, and all of my family except my immediate family still is in Canada. So I was born there, but I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So that's kind of really where the accent comes in, the Midwestern. And then from there, I was like, I'm done with the cold. So I went to the University of Miami and I graduated there with a degree in education, elementary education. And I got married super young. I've known my husband since I was 2 and we ended up at the same college somehow. And so it was just...
somehow.
Yeah. So
that's great.
Seriously. I actually did transfer, so it probably wasn't me. But so then we moved to North Carolina, and that's kind of like when my health issues really started to like come out. And I was a teacher. I taught first grade and kindergarten. And, during I only was a teacher for about 2 years. And during my second year, I just caught like a ton of viruses, like all the viruses, swine flu, there was just everything. And I think that triggered my immune system. And my immune system was like, all right, let's go nuts. Let's have like a really fun party. And so I'm really thankful. My first rheumatologist was a super amazing guy in Raleigh. And he diagnosed me actually with rheumatoid arthritis. And so that was my first diagnosis. And that kind of came about with, I couldn't write on the board anymore. I couldn't bend and read with the kids. And I think I was like 22 or 23. So, I mean, I was pretty young to have joint issues. So that's kind of where it started. And then we got pregnant, had a baby, our first son, Noah, and he is now 10. But after birth was complications galore. And so being actually in the humid environment of North Carolina was a huge trigger for my body. And I was not able to be outside. I was not able to just do what you want to be able to do. And my in-laws had lived out here. So when I came out here, I felt better. And my husband, it all just worked out. So we moved here to Southern California about 8.5 years ago. And I have a 6-year-old, or no, he just turned 7. I have a 7-year-old, and after RA, we moved, came here. I got pregnant, and that pregnancy was super, super high risk. He had a ton of heart issues in utero. And so we knew it was going to be complicated, but then the actual labor was super, it was very emergency, very intense, very scary. And after that, I believe is when my body was like, okay, here's your ANA, here's your lupus. And so I was officially diagnosed with lupus in 2020. And then in 2021, it was like, why not have lupus nephritis? Let's throw that in. So I got lupus nephritis, or, a diagnosis of lupus nephritis. Right. And but once you have one autoimmune, you have like 5,000. So yeah, really right now though, we're really focusing on lupus and getting it under control.
So it's interesting that your geographic journey and your lupus journey have this sort of intertwined existence with the humidity and all the different climates you've been in and things like that. And I know when we talked before, you really can feel the difference between the different climates that you've been in and how you feel. And is that more the RA or is that all the symptoms? Is that more the joints?
Yeah, so I would say it's all the symptoms. I also have POTS. I don't know if you guys, POTS is like dysautonomia. So that actually I got diagnosed with in North Carolina. And so that was really what I think my body was like, no humidity, no. And so I think really it was the RA and the POTS because it is a little bit more joint related and it is like very, my heart rate goes up in humidity randomly. And just, it's harder for me to like even just sit up and function. So definitely I have noticed my body is very affected by weather. And even when we get like a storm here in Los Angeles, which never ever happens, but I can feel it. Like I know my husband's like, you should have been a weather person. Like you predict everything. So yeah.
And so in between the two kids, after your first child was born, did you notice a sort of reprieve of your symptoms? Because sometimes pregnancy seems to set off the fireworks like it did with your second child. What did it do after your first?
So during pregnancy with my first, I had like normal morning sickness and pregnancy stuff, but my RA went into remission. And I felt like, oh, I can move my hands, like, oh my gosh, I can write. So during my first pregnancy, totally, I noticed a huge difference during pregnancy. I was really sick, but it was like, I want to feel like this, it felt really good until, of course, you hit your third trimester and you're just like, bleh. But really, yes. So totally felt remission in symptoms. And then with my second pregnancy, it was very intense. And I had I did not feel a complete relief in symptoms. I would say definitely some relief in arthritic symptoms. But in terms of like fatigue and everything, like I was just out for 9 months.
It sounds like the second pregnancy was super stressful too. Plus being pregnant with a toddler is always stressful. But I would think the stress of having, a baby with heart issues in the utero and all of that really can exacerbate all of what's going on in your body.
Yes. I really believe that's kind of like, I believe the first trigger for my autoimmune stuff was viruses teaching. And I think the second, like, okay, we're just going to go all out was after my second pregnancy. Totally. It was just a crazy experience. And I should have probably been at a different hospital. I should have probably taken it all more seriously than I did, even during pregnancy, even knowing that he had heart complications. It was still just kind of like, you're fine. And then when labor happened, it was, they told us basically, my husband couldn't come and they rushed us into surgery. This happened in like 10 minutes. They couldn't find my son's heartbeat. And so they said, you're going to have a stillbirth and you're like, passing in and out of consciousness. So it was one of the most intense things that's ever happened. But also during like that absolute craziness, I just felt a peace from God that it was like, okay, he's going to take care of this. And it was very, it was like, that was my, they didn't have time to give me meds or anything. So I just really was like, okay, God, like, I need you, please protect my baby, please be with me. And, honestly, so it was like really chaotic for probably like, let's say an hour. And he came out crying. So he was he was just beautiful, healthy, wonderful baby boy. And, so that
Had they misdiagnosed the heart issues that they thought he had?
So babies can have like holes in their hearts, and then sometimes during pregnancy, then they just like heal themselves. And so they weren't really sure because to get that ultrasound was at a peer, I don't even know, like the specialist of OBs. So I'm not really sure, because it just afterwards he was healthy, and that's all. Like I was just like, yay, let's make sure, his heart's good. Let's make sure he's good. He can eat.
Yep.
He's breathing. So that was probably the biggest miracle I've ever experienced. And it was
Yeah.
like wonderful and
Fantastic.
awful. Yeah.
Yeah. My son had a small hole that closed up, within a couple of weeks after they didn't find it till he was born, but it was super tiny and went away. But even that is super scary when it's happening. And,
Yes.
but yes, these kids are, a handful and add to all of the complications, I think, of autoimmune illness in good ways and bad ways. I think there's managing your stress as a parent when you're healthy is one thing, but how do you manage your stress as a parent when you're also concerned that stress is going to, literally cause a storm in your body?
Totally. I would say in the past year, last January, I had like a huge flare, and I couldn't swallow. Like, it like changed I lost a ton of weight. It was very obvious to my kids, like that mom was super sick. It was very intense, and there was like no answers at the time. And I was just losing weight, and it was 2020, so I was technically part of the time like homeschooling my two kids. And then I think that kind of triggered a lot of stuff too, the stress of what happened during COVID, and all of a sudden having two kids home all day. Whereas like when they're not home, I definitely schedule my day to have like rest and peace. And, I would say parenting is, especially as a lupus patient or autoimmune, when they're babies and you have to change their diaper and feed them and you're responsible for everything, that is the heart. That is so hard. That is your spoons going like you just don't have any, but you're trying to, keep your child, fed and well diapered. And so I would say post that was a very stressful time. I do have an amazing supportive husband that is very hands-on. So when things get like really bad, he really steps in and takes over carpool. He does a lot. And so I'm super grateful for that. And then as we mentioned about, therapy and Dr. Blythe, that's a huge part of my whole like healing and just accepting what my life is, what it is and what it's going to be, because it is nothing like I thought it was. Nothing is how I thought it would be. And I feel like every time you get a flare, then you re-grieve. Like it's a re-grieving. And so I went there. It's like, I just don't want to be sad when I have a flare anymore. Like, can you just just take care of that? And unfortunately, life doesn't work like that. And it's every time it's a process. And I'm learning how to grieve and how to deal with just those emotions are pretty intense sometimes and can be very isolating as well.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that. It's sort of like once you get on a healthier path and you look back and you go, oh, wow, I didn't have those PVCs or those heart issues or those, my breathing was good for the last few months. And you go, all right, you know what? I can cruise now. And something always twists and turns you. And it does. I think there's always that moment of like, oh God, why can't I just not have this dip,
100%.
This speed bump? And you have to tell yourself, you know what, you got to remember that good time and say, okay, I'm going to be there again. It's just, how long was it going to take? And what are the, what's all the nonsense that we have to go through in order to get there?
100%. And I think, not knowing like how long, for me, it's when you get the flu or whatever, you kind of know that there's hopefully going to be an ending. I don't, long COVID, I don't know, but you kind of can get through it. But when you have a flare, like I have no idea how long it's going to last. It could last, the worst one lasted about 6 months, and it took a ton of steroids to just kind of calm me down. But I will say that steroids are, we have a very love-hate relationship. I will never forget the first time I went on steroids. I was young and I was with my husband and he was making a toast. I was like, why are you, like, I don't know. I just got this rage and I never knew what steroid rage was or that it could make you super anxious. And so we laughed about like, okay, can I make toast? Because the one time I like totally just, lost it. So steroids are amazing in terms of they help my symptoms. It's awesome. But mentally, they caused me so much anxiety and so much, I have to just be more careful of how I'm sleeping and all of that kind of stuff. So it's such a blessing to be able to calm your body down and like, I have immediate relief. But then of course, you don't get anything for free.
Right. No, there's the downside to that for sure. And I think each time there's also the anxiety of what is this flare going to, how bad is this particular symptom or issue going to be? I mean, you can hear my voice. I'm coming out of COVID, dodged it for 2.5 years, got diagnosed the same day as Fauci. So I figured I made it. If I made it as long as Dr. Fauci, then, I did my job. But in that first few days, you think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen here? And I think that happens sort of across the board with all of the, a heart issue, a kidney issue, it's like, okay, let's run that best to worst scenario in your head. And then it's about taking your anxiety and calming down. And then, okay, how do we battle the beast in front of us?
Yes, completely. And, with lupus and autoimmune disease, it's like 1,700 specialists that you have to see. And so I really try to look, because it is exhausting to make those appointments, to continue with the testing, you're already tired. And then they're like, well, in order to for us to help you, you have to do 100 steps. And I'm like, but so I try to look at being sick now as my job, because you can feel like you don't have a lot of worth when you're in bed a lot. And I started to feel like, well, wait, I'm working a ton. I'm trying to get better. I'm going to my appointments. I'm making, I'm doing all the tests and stuff like that. And so I think I had to take that, my mindset, like, okay, you're not doing anything. You're just laying in bed. Your kids are growing up and you're missing it. And I had to kind of switch it from that to, hey, you're working really hard. Like, you're taking care of your body. Good for you. Parenting in this season might look differently. It might be from bed. We might watch a little bit more iPad than the regular family. And that's just like how it is. And so we've kind of accepted it. I also think because I've always been sick, my kids have never seen a completely healthy me. I think that's helped a little bit too, because they just know, they kind of, know flavors now. They know mom is sick. They are the sweetest. I mean, I am just beyond blessed with my kids and my husband. They are what keep me going and keep me trying to live the best life that I can live. Excellent.
All right. On that note, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about how you're living the best life you can live. We're going to talk about your businesses and sort of what the future looks like. So we're going to be right back with Krissy Stevenson. Hang on.
Lupus LA's fellowship program is an essential part of ensuring the training of future rheumatologists. The nation is experiencing a serious shortage of pediatric rheumatologists. Today, there are approximately 300,000 children diagnosed with rheumatic conditions in the United States, but only about 250 practicing pediatric rheumatologists to meet this tremendous need.
We are back on the Lupus LA Your Story, Our Fight podcast with our guest, Krissy Stevenson. So, Krissy, I know, so when you first were diagnosed with RA, and which led to lupus, you were teaching school at the time. So tell me a little bit about kind of that destroy. I know you tried to go back to work a few times, and sort of give me that evolution, both how it happened and sort of mentally how that occurred.
Yeah. So I went to school, obviously, and to be a teacher. And that is what I wanted to be ever since I was a little kid. That's what I played, being teacher. So it was a really big deal for me to fill that dream. And so when I realized that, the first realization was I can't teach and have kids. I will never have patience for my child if I'm teaching. So that was kind of the first, when I started to feel more fatigued And then when I was diagnosed and when the physical, like you can't write and you can't bend, that is like a whole thing to get used to as well. Being young, people do not understand that. And it takes a lot to kind of like stick up for yourself and be like, no, I'm actually in a ton of pain. And no, I actually have RA. And, and so it kind of took a courage to accept what was happening in my body and kind of see, okay, like what's your plan, God? Like, what do you have? And so I quit teaching, which was it was very sad. I loved teaching. But it was also very teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
Necessary step. Yeah.
Yes. Right. God bless them. So, after that, I just worked at home for my dad and kind of just glided. And then I got pregnant. And then after pregnancy, I kind of just became just a mom. Didn't really work anymore, just a mom. But then
no such thing as just a mom.
True. Yes. Okay,
no such thing.
That is so true. And I do regret
having watched it first, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and it is, it can be brutal at times and so tough.
Yes.
So no such thing, but go ahead.
And, being young and not being able to change your child's diaper and not being able, we had stairs, and there was so much that of course went into taking care of a kid that it was like being served humble pie, because you can't do this, you can't do that. And it really felt like everything was being taken from me physically and mentally and emotionally. And so when we moved out here, my husband traveled a lot for work. So I stayed with Noah. And he was probably 3 or 4 at the time. So he was, out of diapers, which is a big step because you don't as a person with, every move takes something. So you're trying to change a child's diaper. That's a lot of spoons, if you know the spoon theory, where it's just you only have so many spoons. And being a mom or dad and being sick, those spoons go really quick. And so it was a lot of accepting that that's kind of how life is going to be. I need help, more help than a normal, functional human would. And then when I was pregnant with Luke, that was just, as we said, kind of crazy. And after Luke was born, I had this period of just pure joy. I think just because when you go through something so intense and you almost lose your baby and your body, you don't feel anything because you're just so happy to have your baby and have just a healthy family. And so I kind of had a good, maybe 3 months-ish after Luke, and then everything kind of came crashing down. And so in that period, I needed my husband home more, and he was traveling a lot. So we were trying to figure out how he could be home. And so long story short, he had another job that he could kind of do from home. And then we got into, my parents are very big into franchising. And so we, in 2017, when I was kind of I got this again, I'm getting my group back. My kids, we're done having children. This should be easy. Not easy. I should be able to do something.
Manageable.
Yes, exactly. And so we decided, what a story. We got into a business called Solo Salon Studios. Mm-hmm. And so basically we lease out spaces to hairstylists or estheticians, and they have their own studio. And they're their own business owners. So I loved the part of empowering women to become their own business owner. I loved so many things about the concept and the business. But unfortunately, right as we were about to start opening, COVID happened. And so it was very, very stressful. And basically 2020, we were just trying to figure out how to stay afloat. It was just insane to own a hair studio in California. Yes. So that added a ton of stress, and I could not do it. My body, I could not handle the stress. It really was beyond. And so my husband stepped up which thank God, it's such a blessing. So he stepped up and kind of took over.
What's his name? I want to make sure he gets credit to the work. He stepped up a whole lot of times.
He has. He's like, just him. Like God just gave me him because he knew I was going to be a disaster. So he's like, all right, I'll give you a good man. So
starting when you were 2 years old, which is, he really started early. Right.
Yeah, we did. I have a video of him at my brother's birthday party. My brother and him are in the same grade, a couple of years older. Okay. And he saved me from the ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese. I was like 2 or 3 years old. I mean,
is there anything better than that? That's great.
No. Yeah. So, and again, I also want to add marriage. It's a lot of hard work. It hasn't been like, oh, we're just like super happy. No, like we work on our marriage, and I love him to death, but of course, like any marriage, you have ups and downs. And so I want to just make that aware, like, hey, we are happily married, but it is not easy. And especially with being chronically ill and, just all of it, it's just complicated. There's so many aspects. And so, and he had to step up and take over a business that I was going to do. So all these things are wonderful, but they are trying, and especially owning a business in 2020 with that. So long story short, he has basically taken over all the businesses. We just talk about the problems, but I'm pretty removed right now because of my health. I really am trying to just get to a good place where my mind, body, soul is good. Now that has been very challenging. And so, so right now I'm kind of in I don't even know how to describe it, kind of like in a limbo phase. I got off lupus nephritis medicine and am starting Benlysta. So this will be my second week on Benlysta. So we're kind of like switching up the meds a little bit because I'm trying to get off of steroids. Starting
new medicines and changing things around I think it's a hopeful time, in the sense that, a lot of these new medicines have so much promise. I'm a Benlysta, I was on Benlysta for a number of years, 7, 8, 9 years, something like that, till I switched over to Rituxan for various reasons. But Benlysta, wasn't around when I was diagnosed, wasn't even close to being around. So you realize that there's so much new science. And I think every time you start a new regimen, first of all, I think my opinion is you got to look at it as a positive and not a negative. And a positive, like, this is going to be the drug that, or this is going to be the change or the switch that sets me on the right course. And I think, and I think having businesses and having stuff to go to and go back to and focus on can only be helpful.
Totally. Yes. I completely agree. It is. And especially, like Benlysta is like, it is. It's just so exciting to see that science is actually, we're getting there, and it feels hopeful. Like, okay, now we have Benlysta. So what else are they going to, if Benlysta doesn't work, what? Right. So I totally do feel hopeful, especially with Benlysta just being so specific. Like I had been on Orencia for many years, and that was like an RA med, also self-injectable. I did really well on it. But after both pregnancies, my body stopped taking. So before, with my firstborn, I was on Enbrel, and I was okay. I was doing well. And then after postpartum, it did not work for me. It just completely stopped. So then I went on Orencia, and then Orencia kind of worked for me. And then I had my second child, and Orencia stopped. And now it's just been like a complete. I was on a medicine called Lupkynis for about 8 months, and it's a new medicine too, specifically for lupus nephritis, and super hopeful about that, but kind of taking another course. So again, all of this stuff it's very hopeful. When you're sick for so long, like you're going to be on steroids. You kind of just there is an acceptance, and then there is okay, what can I do to help make things better for the next person who's diagnosed with lupus? And that might be giving you.
Yeah, I think the theme of your story here is resilience. I mean, you first of all, I love your attitude. I love your approach. I think maybe it's the Midwest in you. I don't know, but it's something that I think is only helpful, and And I think it is. I think resilience is so as our last question, I'll say, what does that resilience mean to you? What do you think that theme has really done for you in your fight against these autoimmune illnesses?
I'm so grateful because in a lot of ways, autoimmune diseases have completely shaped me for better. Like, I'm humble. I know just how hard little tasks are. Whereas, like, if I never was sick, I would probably just never know what the fight that all autoimmune people go through. Lupus, I mean, it's very intense, and it's like, and the family is involved. And so for me, my focus right now is I want to be the best mom and the best wife that I can be. And so I am, seeing tons of specialists, I'm seeing, a psychologist, and faith is super, super important to me too. Like, that just like that's my identity, and like that keeps me grounded. So I think that because my kids are at, they're 7 and 10 and a half now, they're like, I'm not having to take care of them physically. It's been such a wonderful thing as a mom, because I think when they were young, I felt so much like a failure because I couldn't, changing diapers, all these things. It was very intense to not be able to do it. And so now that they're older and I'm able to, see a psychologist and have these privileges that I realize that not everyone has, to be at home, to be able to rest and all these things. So I think that just having the desire to want to be a better mom and a wife, and I want to enjoy life. Like, when you spend 7 months in a bed, you realize, hey, no one wants that. And some people think that you're lazy or whatever, but no, like, no one wants to be sick in a bed. And I promise you that. And so I think that even just having, this summer, I'm going to do stuff. And if it costs me going on more steroids, I don't care, because these are memories. So those are the kind of like decisions that I have to make too. Like, hey, what trips are we going to go on to? And that's been a super hard thing too, because I've had to cancel like 100 million times. And so you don't seem reliable. And so, but this summer I was like, you know what, if I'm just going to do it and we'll see what happens, because I just really don't want to be in bed. So and then a part of that too is, I've been using like mobility devices, and that was, that took a while to kind of like accept too, like being,
Sure.
If I need a wheelchair, like that was, those things are, again, like acceptance. But I do believe right now that those things, Benlysta, God, like that's what's getting me to this better, healthier me.
Love it. I love it. All right. Now, here's what you may not know about Krissy, because I haven't told you yet, but Krissy has a super, I don't want to say fun, because it's not fun, but your Instagram and your online social media world, I think, is really honest. It's open. It's raw, but it's got fun to it. It's funny, and it's got, so I really recommend it. Tell everybody your Instagram, your social media tags.
Yes. So my social media tag is chronically ill Krissy. So that's,
we'll put it up on the screen. Don't worry. We'll pop it up there.
And honestly, I just started that. I have a personal Instagram, but I decided to go make a public Instagram because, I wanted to create something that other people got. Like, my personal Instagram doesn't have a lot of autoimmune people with lupus, and so no one like got it. And so I wanted to like just feel like, hey, I can share this and maybe help someone feel less alone and having a horrible skin day, or all these just things that happen. So yeah, so I started, I think, in January, and it has been a super fun like outlet for me, and it's been amazing, like the support I've received from people, and like they get it. And so I kind of needed to find my people and like the people that could get it, and so they get it. So I'm really grateful that I can have like that expression and that like outlet. It's been helpful.
It's really good, and it's really good, and because obviously I've seen a lot of them, and I think if you're looking for somebody who's honest and positive and optimistic, and check out Chronically Ill Krissy. Thank you, Krissy, for joining the podcast. This has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and feel better, and stay well.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.